Welcome to Essential Botany, sponsored by the Colorado Native Plant Society and Pueblo County, Colorado State University Extension. My name is Dr. Maggie Gaddis, and I will be presenting the first section of this course to you via video instruction. The objectives of this class are to learn generalized flower and plant parts and to learn how plants are grouped and named. We want to learn how to identify plant family characteristics and learn what you need to know to key plant to species. The most important thing about this course is that you practice while you have the access to mentors through the Colorado Native Plant Society and Extension programs. So let's get started. The kingdom Plantae is divided into two major groups. And before we get there, let's remind ourselves that all life on Earth is divided into three domains: eukarya, archaea, and prokarya. Then, within the eukarya, the multicellular organisms, we have several kingdoms: the plants, the animals, the fungi, the protists. Within the Plantae, we have this large classification of non-vascular and vascular plants. Vascular plants have a method to transport water throughout the plant body part. They have actual veins. Xylem and phloem are similar to animal biology, where you have a circulatory system. So in the xylem, water and nutrients move up from the roots where they were absorbed, and the phloem takes photosynthase through the plant. From where photosynthesis takes place in the leaves, where there are stoma, and sometimes in the stems, there are chlorophyll as well. And those sugar materials move down through the plant body. There are several organizations for vascular plants. So in a monocot stem, we see that we have xylem and phloem arranged in this way, coming up through the center. And remember that we don't have any secondary growth in monocots. So this design facilitates that. And then in a non-woody dicot stem, the xylem and phloem are arranged in a different pattern. Now remember, these are the plants that do have vegetative growth laterally, but they tend to die off from year to year. So we don't consider this wood, we just consider it vegetative matter. But then finally in the woody dicot stem, the center of this design is actually heartwood. It's cells that are no longer functioning biologically. And so then we see that the xylem and phloem are arranged in this circular pattern. Now, among the vascular plants, the plants that can transport water throughout their stems, there are seedless and seeded varieties of organisms. So the seedless varieties are ferns. Ferns have spores. They look like these little brown fuzzy dots on the underside of the leaves, and that is the reproductive material. In contrast, seeded vascular plants have some form of a seed, which is essentially the food, shelter, and water for the offspring, and that whole protected compartment is designed in two ways. We have gymnosperms that create cones and angiosperms that create flowers. Gymnosperm, as a functional name, literally means naked seed. These are non-flowering species, and most of their pollination is facilitated by gravity and wind. And so we're not designing through evolution a flower to attract pollinator. There's no pollinator relationship here. There is gravitational and elevational advantages. So for example, the male cones that are depicted in this picture are typically at the top of conifers, and the female cones, which are the woody cones you're used to seeing, are somewhere down lower. So the sperm can land on the ova and fertilization can occur. So we discussed the cone-bearing plants. This is a image of what would be similar to the female cone. And let's take a look at the pine family. So another factor and morphological characteristic of gymnosperms is that they have needle-like leaves. And needles are a great adaptation for harsh climates that lack water and also are potentially very cold. So if you think about the caloric requirements for producing a needle versus a leaf, think about how a needle lasts for 6 to 8 years. So the lifespan is 6 to 8 years. So the caloric investment for producing a needle, which is heavy in lignin, these secondary compounds, it pays off because that photosynthetic organ lives longer. But in contrast, we have leaves, and leaves are only annual. They only live for 1 year. So that's a lot of uh, caloric investment for a body part that's only going to last for 1 year. So within the gymnosperms, we look at the different kinds of families that we have. So we have firs, larches, spruces, pines, and Doug firs, which are like false firs. When we look at the cypress family, we have scale or all-like leaves. So here in our climate, this is demonstrated in the juniper family. Now, if we contrast this to this gymnosperm strategy for survival, wind and gravity pollinated, naked seed, we now look at angiosperms, the flowering plants. They have a completely different reproductive strategy. So among the angiosperms, we have monocots and dicots. Monocots and dicots represent or demonstrate different ways of a physical morphology, a form, facilitating a function. So as we mentioned before, in monocots, the phloem and xylem are arranged randomly throughout the cross-section of the stem. In dicots, there's a more circular arrangement. And then when we look at the leaf veination, monocots have a parallel veination, and dicots have a palmate or pinnate veination. So very simply, we could say monocots are grasses and dicots are flowers. But of course, those rules do not apply as simply as that. There are many flowers that are monocots, like in our native plant base, we have wild irises, we have glacier lilies, and these are examples of monocots that are native plants and they are flowers. And then let's look at the flower parts. So when you are looking at a monocot flower, there's always going to be parts in threes. And that drawing right there looks a lot like a glacier lily. And then the dicots have flower parts in fours or fives. And then finally, there are different ways of producing the collidins within the seed. And so a monocot has only one seed leaf and a dicot has two seed leaves. So if you're just looking at a freshly germinated seed and you see two baby leaves, it's definitely a dicot. And if you see one blade, it is a monocot. We'll move to dicot examples in the next video.